Hello, I'm Christopher Buford, and I'm doing my final presentation on Van Gogh. I titled this Van Gogh, the Tortured Artist, and yeah, let's get into it. Van Gogh was born in March 30th of 1853. He was born to a super religious upper middle class family, and he was a self-taught painter. At 27, he really started to focus on his paintings after he had numerous failed jobs as a missionary and as a failed art dealer. And he produced almost 900 paintings in his lifetime. Uh, Van Gogh struggled with mental health. He was super poor, and after not being able to hold that many jobs, he was super poor. He couldn't even pay farmers and peasants to paint them, and I'm sure that sent him into a deep depression. Doctors were saying that he was dealing with epilepsy, and he never sold a painting in his lifetime, which I'm sure weighed him down as well. So here we have the famous ear incident where Vincent and his friend, famous French artist Paul Gauguin, who they had a really big argument about painting. Vincent wanted to paint more realistically and was trying to make his case with that, but Paul was not backing down from Vincent, and Paul was really trying to get him to understand like why he likes to paint with his imagination, and Van Gogh was not having it. So he ran off and cut off a part of his ear. And the story says that it's a huge part of his ear. And at first, not a lot of people believed that it was so much of his ear. They only thought it was the bottom part of his earlobe. But here we have actually a doctor's report where they showed exactly how much of his ear was cut off. So this was probably the only true thing about this. There's reports saying that he gave his ear to a prostitute after he was done cutting it off as like a showing of how much he loved her, or whatever it might have been. It's said to not be true, and we don't know. That's just what it is with Van Gogh. We only know some parts. We don't know the whole, and he's just a mythical being at this point with all of these stories. So yeah, this is where I started to pick up, and I love these next two paintings that he did. The paintings were done shortly after this accident with his ear, so I'd love to show that. This is a portrait with bandaged ear. This is one of the most famous pieces that he's done. This is, done in a typical Van Gogh style, little brushstrokes to illustrate an overall big picture. I love, his background piece. It looks like a poster, might be a window, but just how simple he does that is super amazing to see. And I'm super happy to, have experienced this painting. But my favorite painting is this next one that I'm going to show you guys. This painting here is Portrait with Bandaged Ear and Pipe. I love this piece. This is done in a typical, it's done in a typical Van Gogh style, but it kind of it cancels out the background from the last image and mainly focuses on who or what he might have been going through. His eyes are really telling and really melancholy, and this is done in a more realistic type of way, especially with his face. His face isn't really done in a, with the little brushstrokes. It feels more structured, like he did this, of course it's a self-portrait, but it feels a little bit different throughout his other portraits that he's done with his doctor or whoever he might have grabbed. I love the details in his jacket. It's the buttons, the swirl around the buttons, the green mixes with the browns, and the smoke steaming from his pipe, done in little strokes, just to let you know that he is definitely smoking on something. And this is awesome to see. Super simple, but this is so technical. I love his Ushanka hat too. This is an amazing piece for me. I have this saved as my wallpaper on my phone. So this is when we start getting into the tumultuous past of Vincent van Gogh. Here's a quote from him that he wrote to his brother Theo, who was an art dealer as well. I well knew that one could break one's arms and legs before, and that then afterwards that could get better. But I didn't know that one could break one's brain, and that afterwards that got better too. Um, this to me signifies that he knows that something was wrong with him mentally, and he was trying to fix it. He was trying to deal with his day to day, but it just wasn't working out for him. There's stories that say the tenants that surrounded his yellow house in Arles, France, they were trying to kick him out because he was just constantly having breakdowns. He was in a confused state a lot of the times whenever they found him, and this led to Vincent admitting himself into an asylum. And this is where he painted his most famous painting, Starry Night, which is displayed to the right here. Classic painting. So about a year and a half after he admits himself into the asylum, Van Gogh leaves to move closer to his brother in a village outside of Paris. I don't know how to quite pronounce that word, but definitely Parisian. So yeah, from here his mental health just declined. He thought he could go back to his old life, and it just didn't work for him. He lost all hope that he would return to his normal state, and this is where Van Gogh would take his own life in 1890. But this is also another lore of his that they say that he shot himself, but they couldn't find the gun. This is something that is like plays into the lore, the mythical being that Van Gogh was, and that is kind of interesting to see. There's so many stories about Van Gogh that you don't know is true or may be true, but we know that he was dealing with something. And this to the right was his very last painting, done beautifully. Classic Van Gogh strokes, little strokes to create an overall huge picture. So the main reason why I decided to choose mental health and dealing with Van Gogh is because I noticed that there is a pattern within the art community. There's that stigma today that this idea that you're naturally a crazy person if you're an artist, and that's not true. A lot of us are dealing with things, and that shouldn't just be a reason to write off anybody, let alone an artist. Plethora of artists within the community have been taken from us because of mental health issues and how they cope with them. And prime example is to the right. My favorite artist of all time, Basquiat, Jean-Michel, a New York artist in the 1980s that was dealing with mental health issues and coping with them with really harsh drugs and like heroin and cocaine and things like that to make up for whatever he was dealing with at the time. This painting was done shortly after his friend Andy Warhol passed, and he went through a mental decline, and shortly after they found him dead in his apartment, overdosed on heroin. And it's kind of this was in the 80s when this happened to Basquiat, and with Van Gogh, people are 200 years later still trying to diagnose him with manic depressive disorder and alcoholic poisoning. So people are recognizing this within the community. It's just for Van Gogh, it was too early for that to for the science. In conclusion, Van Gogh went through some extremely rough moments in his life. His overall mental health was a big problem that was unable to be solved due to the limitations of science during the time. The conversation of mental health is a constant topic being brought up today, and sometimes I feel like our once in a generational artists aren't given that same luxury. They're either written off as having rich people problems or not really seeing it until something happens to them. This should be a major part of everyday discussions when talking about people. Vincent's paintings wasn't famous during the time he was alive, but now his story is being told truthfully instead of that common stigma of him being a crazy artist or a tortured artist. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Professor, for everything you've done this semester, and hopefully I see you guys soon. Peace.